The German Shepherd's ears flattened against his skull, his entire body rigid as stone. Officer Dan Mitchell felt the leash go taut in his hand, the leather biting into his palm. Around them, second graders giggled and whispered, but Rex, the department's most decorated K-9, wasn't moving. His dark eyes were locked on Ms. Whitmore's desk at the front of the sunny classroom, and a low, continuous growl rumbled from deep in his chest. Dan had worked with Rex for 6 years. He'd seen him track fugitives through swamps, detect drugs hidden in car engines, protect officers during armed standoffs. But he had never, not once, seen Rex freeze like this during a simple school visit. And the way the teacher's smile flickered, just for a heartbeat, before she smoothed it back into place, that made Dan's instincts flare like a siren in the dark. Before we start, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It means more than you know. And I'm curious, where are you watching from? Put your country in the comments so we can welcome you. The morning had begun like any other community outreach day. Maplewood Elementary's principal, Mrs. Donna Hayes, had invited the local police department to bring their K-9 unit for a safety and careers presentation. It was meant to be routine, show the kids how police dogs worked, let them ask questions, maybe pet Rex if he was calm. Dan and his partner, Officer Lisa Torres, had done dozens of these visits. The children always loved it. Rex, despite his intimidating size and sharp intelligence, had always been gentle around kids, patient with their small hands and excited squeals. But today was different. Rex had been fine in the hallway, fine in the cafeteria where they greeted staff, fine as they walked toward Ms. Angela Whitmore's second grade classroom. The moment they stepped through the doorway, though, everything changed. Rex's stance shifted. His hackles rose. His nose lifted, nostrils flaring as he inhaled deeply, again and again, his entire focus narrowing to a single point. The large wooden desk positioned near the chalkboard. Ms. Whitmore stood beside it now, her hands clasped in front of her pale yellow cardigan, her smile wide and welcoming. She was in her mid-40s, with neatly styled brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave her a bookish, trustworthy appearance. Her classroom walls were covered in colorful alphabet posters, student drawings, and a bulletin board titled, "Our Class Family," featuring photos of smiling children. Everything about the room screamed safe, nurturing, normal. Except Rex wouldn't stop growling. "Kids, why don't we all sit crisscross on the carpet?" Ms. Whitmore's voice was cheerful, practiced. She gestured toward the reading area in the corner, where a rainbow rug and beanbag chairs awaited. "Let's give Officer Mitchell and Rex some space to show us what police dogs can do." The children shuffled over obediently, their chatter filling the room. But Dan barely heard them. He was watching Rex. The dog's muscles were coiled, his tail low and stiff. This wasn't excitement. This wasn't playfulness. This was the alert stance Rex used when he detected something wrong. Something dangerous. "Rex, heel," Dan commanded, his voice low and firm. Rex didn't budge. His eyes never left the desk. Lisa stepped closer, her expression shifting from casual to concerned. "Dan, what's he got?" "I don't know." Dan crouched beside Rex, running a hand along his partner's broad shoulders. The dog's body was trembling, not with fear, but with intensity. With purpose. "Rex, what is it, boy?" The growl deepened. Ms. Whitmore laughed lightly, but there was a tightness around her eyes now. "Is he okay? Sometimes dogs get nervous in new places, don't they?" Dan straightened, his gaze locking onto hers. "Rex doesn't get nervous. He's one of the best-trained K-9s in the state." He kept his tone polite but firm. "He's alerting to something." "Ma'am, is there anything near or inside your desk that might be causing this reaction?" Her smile faltered. "Just for a second. My desk? No, of course not. It's just papers, supplies, the usual teacher things." She gestured vaguely, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Maybe he smells my lunch? I had tuna salad earlier. Dogs love tuna, right?" Rex barked. Once. Sharp and commanding. Several children gasped. One little girl with pigtails clutched her friend's arm. Dan felt his heart rate kick up. Rex only barked like that during active operations. When he'd found something. "Ms. Whitmore," Lisa said carefully, stepping forward, "we'd like to take a quick look at your desk, just to be safe." Rex has never given a false alert in his entire career. The teacher's face went pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. Her hands, which had been clasped loosely, now gripped each other tightly, knuckles whitening. I don't think that's necessary. You're scaring the children. Her voice was still trying for calm, but there was an edge to it now. A brittleness. Dan exchanged a glance with Lisa. Years of partnership meant they didn't need words. Something was very, very wrong here. Kids, Lisa called out brightly, moving toward the reading carpet. How about Officer Torres tells you some cool stories about Rex while Officer Mitchell finishes checking the room? I want to hear about the time Rex found a missing hiker in the mountains. Hands shot up. Excited voices chimed in. Lisa was good at this, redirecting, keeping things light. But Dan saw the way her other hand rested on a radio. Ready. Dan turned back to Ms. Whitmore. His voice dropped, professional and unyielding. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside. Rex is trained to detect narcotics, explosives, and human remains. Whatever he's alerting to, we have a responsibility to investigate. If there's nothing in your desk, this will take 30 seconds and we'll be done. Her mouth opened, closed. Her eyes darted toward the desk, then back to Dan, then to the children on the carpet. For just a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped, and Dan saw something beneath it. Fear, or was it guilt? She swallowed hard. Fine, but you're wasting your time, and you're going to owe me an apology. Dan didn't respond. He moved toward the desk, Rex pulling forward eagerly now, his entire body vibrating with focus. The dog planted himself directly in front of the middle drawer, his nose pressed against the wood, his tail stiff and high. Dan's hand hovered over the drawer handle. Behind him, Ms. Whitmore's breathing quickened, and in that suspended, terrible moment before he pulled it open, Dan Mitchell realized that whatever was inside that desk was going to change everything. Dan's fingers closed around the brass handle of the middle drawer. It was cool to the touch, unremarkable. Around him, the classroom felt suddenly too quiet despite the children's chatter in the corner. Rex's growl had subsided into a focused whine, his nose still pressed against the wooden front panel, his breath coming in short, insistent huffs. Officer Mitchell, really, this is unnecessary, Ms. Whitmore started, her voice climbing an octave. Dan pulled the drawer open. At first, it looked exactly as she described. Mundane teacher supplies. A stapler. Boxes of paper clips. Stacks of graded spelling tests held together with rubber bands. A coffee-stained mug full of pens. Red markers. A roll of stickers featuring smiling suns. Nothing alarming. Nothing that would explain Rex's behavior. But Rex wasn't backing down. If anything, his intensity increased. He pawed at the drawer's edge, a sharp, deliberate scrape of claws against wood. Rex, easy, Dan murmured, but his own pulse was hammering now. He trusted this dog with his life. If Rex said something was here, something was here. Dan began removing items carefully, setting them on the desk surface. The stapler, the mug, the papers. Ms. Whitmore stood frozen 3 feet away, her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale as chalk. Lisa had stopped mid-story, watching from the corner of her eye while keeping the children engaged and distracted. Dan's hand reached the back of the drawer. His fingers brushed something smooth. Cold. He pulled it forward. A phone. Not a smartphone, one of those older flip phones. A burner. The kind people used when they didn't want to be traced. Dan's stomach dropped. He looked up at Ms. Whitmore. Her eyes were locked on the phone in his hand, wide and glassy with barely concealed panic. Ma'am, Dan said slowly, his voice level but hard. Why do you have a second phone hidden in your desk? That's not mine. Her words tumbled out too fast. Someone must have left it there. A student, maybe, or another teacher borrowing my room, I don't know. Rex barked again. Loud. Insistent. Dan set the phone down and reached back into the drawer, pushing aside a stack of construction paper. His fingers found something else. Small. Metal. Delicate. He pulled it into the light. A bracelet. It was child-sized, made of silver links with a small charm dangling from the center, a tiny engraved heart. And on the heart, in careful script, was a name. Emma. Dan's blood turned to ice. He knew that name. Every officer in the county knew that name. Emma Rodriguez, 8 years old, missing for 3 weeks, vanished on her walk home from school. Her face had been on every news station, every bulletin board, every prayer chain in Maplewood. Her mother's tearful press conferences had shattered hearts across the state. The FBI had been brought in. Search parties had combed the woods. Divers had checked the lake. No trace of Emma had ever been found. Until now. Dan's hand tightened around the bracelet, the metal biting into his palm. He turned slowly to face Ms. Whitmore, and the look on his face must have been terrible, because she took a stumbling step backward, her hand flying to her mouth. "Where is she?" Dan's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the room like a blade. I don't know what that is. Where is Emma Rodriguez?" The classroom went silent. Even the children stopped talking, their small faces turning toward the sudden, sharp anger in Officer Mitchell's voice. Lisa was already moving, crossing the room in 3 strides, her radio in her hand. "All units, this is Torres. We have a 10 to 33 at Maplewood Elementary, requesting immediate backup and a supervisor to room 14, possible evidence in the Rodriguez case." Ms. Whitmore's composure shattered. No, you don't understand. I didn't. It's not what you think." Her voice cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks, but Dan felt no sympathy. Only a cold, focused fury. He picked up the burner phone, flipped it open. The screen glowed to life. No password. He scrolled through the message history, his jaw tightening with every line he read. "Package ready for pickup. Client confirmed. $15,000 transfer complete. New inventory arriving Thursday. Age 6 to 10 preferred. Emma secured. Awaiting transport instructions." Dan's vision blurred at the edges. His hand shook. He'd seen a lot in his years as a cop. Robberies, assaults, overdoses, domestic violence. But this was a new kind of evil. This was a predator who smiled at children every day, who taught them to read and tie their shoes, who hung their artwork on bulletin boards while coordinating their sale to the highest bidder. "Lisa," Dan said, his voice hoarse, "get the kids out. Now, and call Detective Brennan. Tell him we've got a live trafficking case." Lisa didn't hesitate. "All right, kiddos." Her voice was bright, forced. "Change of plans. We're going to go have a special snack time in the cafeteria while Officer Mitchell finishes up here. Everyone line up at the door, quickly and quietly, just like a fire drill." The children, sensing the sudden shift in energy, obeyed without protest. They filed out in a neat line, their teacher's aide, who'd been sitting quietly in the back, ushering them forward with a confused, worried expression. Lisa followed, pulling the door shut behind her with a soft click. Now it was just Dan, Rex, and Ms. Angela Whitmore. The teacher, if she could even be called that anymore, slumped against the wall, her legs seeming to give out beneath her. She slid down to the floor, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "I didn't have a choice," she choked out. "They said they'd kill me. They said, save it." Dan cut her off, his voice like granite. He held up the phone. "This phone has messages about multiple children. Emma's not the only one, is she?" She didn't answer, just kept crying. Rex padded over to Dan's side, sitting at attention, his dark eyes never leaving the woman crumpled on the floor. The dog's job was done. He'd found what he was trained to find. He'd found the monster hiding in plain sight. Dan heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy. Quick. Backup was arriving. Within seconds, the door burst open and 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by Principal Hayes, her face stricken with horror. "Angela," Mrs. Hayes whispered, disbelief dripping from every syllable. "Angela, what's happening?" Dan stepped forward, pulling handcuffs from his belt. "Angela Whitmore, you're under arrest for child endangerment, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and human trafficking." He moved behind her, pulling her unresisting arms back, securing the cuffs with sharp, efficient clicks. "You have the right to remain silent." The police station's interrogation room was small and cold, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry wasps. Detective Sarah Brennan sat across from Ms. Angela Whitmore, a manila folder thick with printed messages spread between them. Dan Mitchell stood in the corner, arms crossed, Rex lying quietly at his feet. The dog hadn't left Dan's side since they'd left the school. He didn't need to alert anymore. His work was done, but Dan wanted him there, needed him there. A reminder of what good looked like in a world that suddenly felt very dark. Angela Whitmore looked nothing like the cheerful teacher who'd greeted them that morning. Her makeup was smeared from tears, her cardigan wrinkled, her wrists raw from the handcuffs that had only just been removed for the interview. She stared at the table, hollow-eyed, her hands trembling in her lap. Detective Brennan leaned forward, her voice calm but unyielding. "Ms. Whitmore, we've been through your phone. We have messages dating back 8 months. References to at least 6 children. We have financial records showing deposits into an offshore account. We have Emma Rodriguez's bracelet, which was found in your desk, along with a burner phone containing messages that explicitly discuss her abduction and sale." She paused, letting the weight of it settle. "You're looking at federal charges. Life in prison minimum. Your only chance at any kind of leniency is full cooperation. So I'm going to ask you once, where is Emma Rodriguez?" For a long moment, Angela said nothing. Then, in a voice so quiet Dan had to strain to hear it, she whispered, "I don't know." Brennan's jaw tightened. "You don't know, or you won't say?" "I don't know." Angela's voice broke. "They never told me where the children went after the handoff. That was the point. I was just the spotter, the recruiter. I identified vulnerable kids, ones with single parents, ones whose families wouldn't make too much noise, ones who wouldn't be missed right away. I'd get to know them, learn their routines, pass the information along. Then someone else would handle the pickup." Dan felt bile rise in his throat. This woman had spent years teaching children to trust her, to see her as a safe adult, all while cataloging which ones were easiest to steal. "Emma Rodriguez's mother is a single ER nurse who works night shifts," Brennan said, her voice like ice. "Is that why you targeted her?" Angela flinched but nodded. "They wanted her specifically. Said a client had requested a girl her age, with her features." She squeezed her eyes shut. "I gave them her schedule, told them what time she walked home, what route she took. There's a blind spot near the old railroad bridge where no cameras reach. That's where they took her." "Who is that?" Brennan demanded. "I don't have names. Just a contact. A man who called himself Mr. Smith. I'd send him information through the burner phone, encrypted messages. He'd send payments in crypto. I never met him face to face. Never saw anyone. That was the deal." Dan couldn't stay silent any longer. "Why?" His voice was rough, thick with disgust. "Why would you do this? You're a teacher. You're supposed to protect kids, not sell them like..." He couldn't even finish the sentence. Angela finally looked up, her eyes red and empty. "I had debts. Gambling debts. Bad ones. The kind where people don't just break your legs. They make you disappear. I was drowning. Then one day, someone approached me. Said there was a way out. Easy money. Just provide information. I told myself it wasn't the same as actually hurting them. That I wasn't the one doing the real damage." Her voice cracked. "I told myself I didn't have a choice." "You had a choice," Dan said coldly. "Every single day, you had a choice. And you chose money over children's lives." Brennan held up a hand, silencing him. She pulled a photo from the folder, Emma Rodriguez's school picture. A little girl with bright brown eyes, dark braids, and a gap-toothed smile. "This is who you sold, Ms. Whitmore. 8 years old. She liked reading chapter books and wanted to be a veterinarian. Her mother hasn't slept in 3 weeks. So I'm going to ask you one more time, and I need you to think very carefully. Is there anything in those messages, in your memory, in your interactions with Mr. Smith, that could help us find her?" Angela stared at the photo, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. For a long moment, Dan thought she'd refuse. Then she whispered there was one message. "About a week ago, Smith mentioned a transfer delay because of weather issues at the northern site. I didn't think much of it at the time, but..." She swallowed hard. "He also said something about a rural holding location being secure and off-grid." Brennan's eyes sharpened. Northern site. Rural. Off-grid. She grabbed her phone, typing rapidly. "That narrows it down. We've got 3 abandoned properties in the northern county that fit that profile. Old farmhouses, a shut-down lumber mill, a foreclosed hunting lodge." Dan's heart hammered. How fast can we get units there? I'll have SWAT and FBI on standby in 20 minutes. Brennan stood, grabbing the folder. She looked down at Angela with something close to contempt. You'll be transferred to county holding. Federal agents will want to talk to you next. If you think of anything else, anything that could help us find Emma or the others, you tell the guards immediately. Understood. Angela nodded mutely. As they left the interrogation room, Dan felt Rex press against his leg, a warm, solid reminder of loyalty and goodness. He reached down, running his hand over the dog's head. Good boy, Rex, he murmured. You might have just saved that little girl's life. Because if Emma was still at one of those properties, if they could get there before the traffickers moved her again, there was still a chance. A slim, desperate chance. But it was more than they'd had 6 hours ago, when Rex had refused to leave a classroom, and a teacher's lies had started to crumble. And Dan Mitchell wasn't going to waste it. The convoy of police vehicles tore through the county roads, sirens wailing, lights flashing red and blue against the darkening sky. Dan sat in the lead SUV, Rex secured in the back compartment, his nose pressed to the metal grate, alert and ready. Beside Dan, Detective Brennan was on the phone with the FBI's Crimes Against Children unit, relaying information in clipped, urgent tones. 3 locations. Northern County. SWAT teams are splitting up to hit all 3 simultaneously, she said into the receiver. We don't know which property is the active site, so we can't afford to spook them by hitting one and giving them time to move product from the others. Product. Dan's stomach turned at the word. That's what these monsters called children. Product. Inventory. Packages. Behind them, 2 more SUVs carried tactical units. Officers in body armor, armed with rifles and breaching equipment. A K-9 unit from the neighboring county had also been called in, their tracking dogs ready to search the properties if needed. The FBI had dispatched their own team, which would arrive within the hour, but local law enforcement wasn't waiting. Not when a child's life hung in the balance. How far to the first location? Dan asked, his knuckles white as he gripped the door handle. 10 minutes, the driver, Officer Ramos, replied. The old Hutchins farmhouse. Been abandoned for 5 years. No utilities, no recent sales records. Perfect place to hide someone. Brennan ended her call, her face grim. FBI says this operation has been on their radar for months. They've been tracking a trafficking ring operating across 4 states, but they've never been able to pinpoint locations or identify anyone inside the network. If we can secure Emma and any other children, and if we can grab anyone on site, this could be the break that brings the whole thing down. And if we're too late, Dan's voice was hollow. Brennan met his eyes. We're not too late. We can't be. But Dan knew the statistics. He'd seen the training materials. Every hour a child remained missing, the chances of recovery dropped. After 3 weeks, the odds were. He shook his head, forcing the thought away. Rex had found the lead. That had to mean something. That had to count for something. The farmhouse came into view as they crested a hill, a sagging 2-story structure with peeling white paint and a collapsed porch. The surrounding fields were overgrown with weeds, the dirt driveway rutted and cracked. No vehicles in sight, no lights in the windows. It looked deserted, but Dan had learned long ago that looks could be deceiving. The SUVs pulled to a stop a quarter-mile down the road, out of sight from the house. The SWAT team leader, a broad-shouldered woman named Lieutenant Kara Mills, gathered everyone for a quick briefing. Standard entry protocol, Mills said, her voice low and steady. 2-person teams, clear each room. Watch for tripwires or booby traps. These people are paranoid and they've got reason to be. We're looking for children, evidence, and suspects, in that order. Anyone you find, you secure and call it in. Understood. Understood, the team echoed. Mitchell, keep Rex back until we've cleared the structure. If we need him to track or search, we'll call you in. Dan wanted to argue, wanted to be the first one through the door, but he knew better. This wasn't his area of expertise. His job was to trust the team and let them do theirs. The officers moved out, shadows in the twilight, spreading into formation around the farmhouse. Dan watched from the SUV, his heart hammering, Rex's warm breath on his neck from the back compartment. Minutes crawled by. Then, through his radio, Entry team moving in. Front door breached. A pause. Dan held his breath. First floor clear. No occupants. Moving to second floor. Another agonizing pause. Second floor clear. No signs of recent activity. Property appears abandoned. Dan's shoulders slumped. Brennan cursed under breath. On to the next location, she said. Let's move. They piled back into the SUVs and raced toward the second property, a shuttered lumber mill on the edge of a dense pine forest. The building was massive, all rusted corrugated metal and broken windows, surrounded by rotting stacks of timber and rusted machinery. This time, Dan felt a flicker of something. Hope? Dread? He couldn't tell. The SWAT team deployed again. The same careful approach. The same tense radio chatter. Entry team moving in. Side door breached. Dan waited. First section clear. No occupants. Checking west wing. His radio crackled. East wing, wait, we've got something. Fresh tire tracks in the dirt inside the loading bay. Recent. Within the last few days. Dan's pulse spiked. Brennan leaned forward. That's it. That has to be it. Checking interior offices now, the voice continued. Then, after a pause that felt like an eternity, we've got a locked room. Heavy deadbolt on the outside. Breaching now. Dan heard the dull thud of a battering ram through the radio. Then a voice, high, frightened, young. Please don't hurt me. Dan's chest tightened so hard he couldn't breathe. We got a child. Female, approximately 7 to 9 years old. Appears unharmed but frightened. Requesting medical on-site immediately. Is it Emma? Brennan shouted into the radio. Can you confirm identity? A pause. Then, affirmative. Child confirms her name is Emma Rodriguez. Repeat, we have Emma Rodriguez, alive and responsive. Dan's legs nearly gave out. He braced himself against the SUV, his eyes burning with relief. Beside him, Brennan let out a shaky breath, her hand over her mouth. Thank God, she whispered. Thank God. Rex barked from the back, sensing the shift in energy, his tail thumping against the compartment wall. Dan turned, pulling open the gate, letting the dog jump out. He dropped to his knees, wrapping his arms around Rex's neck, burying his face in the warm fur. You did it, boy, he choked out. You found her. You saved her. Rex licked his face, his tail wagging wildly, and for the first time in hours, Dan Mitchell let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still good left in this world. The ambulance sat in the gravel lot outside the lumber mill, its back doors open. A paramedic crouched inside, speaking softly to a small figure wrapped in a silver emergency blanket. Dan stood a respectful distance away, his heart still racing, watching as Emma Rodriguez, alive, found safe, clutched a stuffed animal one of the officers had grabbed from a convenience store on the way over. She looked so small, so fragile. Her dark hair was tangled, her face pale and streaked with tears, but her eyes, those bright brown eyes from the school photo, were alert. Scared, yes. Traumatized, absolutely. But alive. Detective Brennan approached the ambulance slowly, kneeling down to Emma's eye level. Hi, sweetheart, she said gently. My name is Sarah. I'm a detective, and I'm here to make sure you're safe now. Can you tell me if you're hurt anywhere? Emma shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. I'm okay. I want my mom. Your mom is on her way right now, Brennan assured her. She's going to be here so soon, and she is so excited to see you. Behind them, SWAT units were combing through the mill, photographing everything, collecting evidence. They found a makeshift holding room, a windowless office with a cot, a bucket, and a chain bolted to the wall. It made Dan's blood boil just thinking about it. Emma had been kept there for 3 weeks. Alone, terrified. But she'd survived, and now they had the location. They had evidence. The FBI was already coordinating with international agencies to trace the network's connections. Did you see anyone while you were here? Brennan asked Emma carefully. Any adults who came to check on you? Emma nodded slowly. A man. He wore a mask. He brought me food sometimes. He said if I screamed or tried to leave, something bad would happen to my mom. Her voice cracked. I didn't want my mom to get hurt. Brennan's expression softened with a mix of heartbreak and fury. You were so brave, Emma. So brave. And your mom is safe. I promise. Detective. One of the SWAT officers jogged over, holding an evidence bag. Inside was a laptop. Found this hidden in a back office. It was still powered on. Looks like they left in a hurry. Maybe spooked by something. We've got files, communications, everything. Brennan stood, taking the bag. Get it to the cybercrime unit immediately. I want every file, every message, every contact extracted and analyzed. As the officer hurried off, Dan moved closer, Rex at his side. The dog's demeanor had shifted from alert to calm, as if he, too, understood that the danger had passed. Emma's eyes landed on Rex, and for the first time, a tiny smile flickered across her face. "Is that the police dog?" she asked quietly. Dan smiled. "Yeah, this is Rex. He's the one who helped us find you. He's really big. He is, but he's also really gentle. Would you like to pet him?" Emma hesitated, then nodded. Dan gave Rex a soft command, and the dog stepped forward slowly, lowering his head so Emma could reach him from her seat in the ambulance. Her small hand reached out, fingers sinking into his thick fur. Rex sat perfectly still, his tail wagging just slightly, his dark eyes soft. "He's warm," Emma whispered. "He's a good boy," Dan said. "One of the best." Emma stroked Rex's head for a long moment, and something in her tense posture eased. Just a little, just enough. Then, from the road, the screech of tires. A car door slamming. A woman's voice, raw and desperate. "Emma." Dan turned to see a woman sprinting across the gravel lot, her nurse's scrubs still on, her face streaked with tears. Maria Rodriguez, Emma's mother. "Mom." Emma's voice broke as she tried to stand, but the paramedic gently held her in place. "It's okay, sweetie. Let her come to you," the paramedic soothed. Maria reached the ambulance and collapsed to her knees, reaching for her daughter, pulling her into her arms with a sob that shook her entire body. Emma clung to her, crying, and for a moment the whole world seemed to hold its breath. Dan stepped back, giving them space, his throat tight. Beside him, Brennan wiped at her eyes quickly, trying to maintain her professional composure and failing. "We got her back," Brennan murmured. "We actually got her back. Thanks to Rex," Dan said quietly, his hand resting on the dog's head. "If he hadn't, alerted in that classroom, if we just walked away." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Rex leaned into his leg, and Dan felt the weight of the day settle over him like a heavy blanket. They'd stopped something horrible. They'd saved a child. But the fight wasn't over. Angela Whitmore's cooperation had revealed at least 5 other children who'd been trafficked through the network over the past 8 months. Their locations were still unknown, their fates uncertain. But tonight, one little girl was going home, and that had to be enough. As Maria Rodriguez held her daughter, whispering promises and prayers and apologies into her hair, Dan made a silent vow. He'd work every lead, chase every thread. He and Rex would find the others. Because that's what they did. That's what they were made for. Later, as the FBI rolled in with their black SUVs and agents and windbreakers, as the evidence was cataloged and the scene secured, as Emma and her mother were escorted to the hospital for evaluation, Dan loaded Rex back into the SUV. The dog settled into his compartment with a satisfied huff, his eyes already drooping with exhaustion. "You did good today, partner," Dan said softly. "Real good." Rex's tail thumped once against the floor, and as they drove back toward town, the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, Dan Mitchell allowed himself a moment of gratitude. For training, for instinct, for a dog who refused to back down, for the fact that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys won. The news broke within hours. By the next morning, every major outlet in the state was covering the story. Teacher arrested in child trafficking ring. Police K-9 cracks the case. Emma Rodriguez's rescue became a symbol of hope, and Rex became an overnight hero. The police department's phones rang off the hook with interview requests. Community members dropped off treats and toys for Rex, and the mayor scheduled a commendation ceremony. But Dan Mitchell wasn't interested in the attention. He was in the department's briefing room, surrounded by federal agents, detectives, and task force members, staring at a sprawling wall covered in photos, maps, and timelines. Angela Whitmore's arrest had blown the case wide open. The laptop recovered from the lumber mill had been a gold mine. Encrypted communications, financial transactions, and a database containing profiles of dozens of children. Some had already been recovered. Others were still missing. Special Agent Marcus Holloway, the FBI's lead investigator, stood at the front of the room. He was a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. Thanks to the work of Officer Mitchell, Rex, and the local PD, we've identified 3 key nodes in this trafficking network, Holloway said, pointing to the map. One here in Maplewood, Whitmore's operation. One in Nevada, a trucking company that's been moving victims across state lines. And one in Oregon, a so-called boarding school that's actually a front for exploitation. He tapped another section of the board. We've also identified the man Whitmore called Mr. Smith. His real name is Darren Kozlowski, a former logistics coordinator with ties to organized crime. We believe he's the regional coordinator. He's currently in the wind, but we've frozen his accounts and issued warrants. Dan listened, his jaw tight. Every new detail made him angrier. These people had built an entire system to prey on the most vulnerable. Officer Mitchell, Holloway continued, turning to him. Your K-9's alert was the break we needed. Without that, Whitmore might have continued operating for years. We're requesting that you and Rex remain available for consultation as we move forward. Your insight into her behavior and the physical evidence could be critical. Whatever you need, Dan said. We're in. Holloway nodded. Good. We'll be coordinating raids on the other locations within the week. If any of those sites require K-9 support, we'll call you in. As the meeting wrapped up, Detective Brennan approached Dan. You doing okay? She asked. Honestly? No. Dan rubbed his face. I keep thinking about the kids we haven't found yet. The ones in that database who've been missing for months. Years, some of them. I know. Brennan's voice was heavy. But we're making progress. And Em is safe because of you. Because of Rex, Dan corrected. Because of both of you. Dan glanced toward the corner where Rex was lying on a donated dog bed, surrounded by toys and treats from well-wishers. The dog looked content, but Dan knew him well enough to see the alertness still lingering in his eyes. Rex wasn't off duty yet. Not in his mind. Come on, boy, Dan called. Let's get some air. Rex bounded to his feet, tail wagging, and followed Dan out of the building. They walked to the department's small green space behind the parking lot, where a few trees provided shade and a sense of quiet. Dan sat on a bench, and Rex settled at his feet, his head resting on Dan's boot. For a long moment, they just sat there. Dan stared at the sky, his mind spinning with everything that had happened. A week ago, he'd been doing routine patrols and school visits. Now, he was part of a federal investigation that could save dozens of lives. His phone buzzed. A text from Lisa Torres. Heard you're a celebrity now. Don't let it go to your head. Winky face. Proud of you and Rex. Dan smiled faintly and typed back. Thanks. Couldn't have done it without you running interference with the kids. Another text, this one from an unknown number. He opened it. Officer Mitchell, this is Maria Rodriguez. I don't have the words to thank you and Rex for bringing my Emma home. You gave me my daughter back. You gave me my life back. I will never, ever forget what you did. God bless you both. Dan's throat tightened. He read the message twice, then slipped the phone back into his pocket. He reached down and scratched behind Rex's ears. You hear that, buddy? We made a difference. Rex's tail thumped. Over the next several days, the investigation continued to unfold. Angela Whitmore, facing life in federal prison, agreed to a plea deal in exchange for full cooperation. She provided names, locations, and details about the network's operations. Her testimony led to the arrest of 7 individuals across 3 states, including 2 other spotters who, like her, had used their positions of trust to identify and groom victims. The Nevada Trucking Company was raided. 4 men were arrested, and 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, were recovered from a storage facility on the property. The Oregon boarding school was shut down, and 11 children were rescued from horrific conditions. With each rescue, Dan felt a little more of the weight lift. But he knew the fight was far from over. Trafficking networks were resilient. They adapted. New faces replaced the arrested ones. New locations sprang up. Still, this victory mattered. Every child brought home mattered. 1 month after Emma's rescue, the police department held a public ceremony. The mayor presented Rex with a custom medal, a gold shield engraved with his name and the words hero, protector, lifesaver. The crowd cheered. Cameras flashed. Emma Rodriguez and her mother sat in the front row, both smiling, both healthy, both whole. When it was Dan's turn to speak, he kept it short. "I'm not the hero here," he said, gesturing to Rex sitting calmly beside him. "This dog is." He trusted his instincts. He refused to give up. And because of that, little girl got to go home. That's what heroes do. The applause was deafening. Later, as they walked back to the patrol car, Dan knelt beside Rex and clipped the medal onto his collar. "You earned this," he said quietly. "Every bit of it." Rex licked his face, his tail wagging wildly. And for the first time in weeks, Dan felt something close to peace. 3 months had passed since that October morning when Rex had refused to leave Ms. Whitmore's classroom. The world had changed in that time. For Emma, for her mother, for the dozens of children whose rescues had followed. But for Dan Mitchell, the changes ran even deeper. He'd always believed in his work, always known that being a police officer meant standing between good and evil. But now he understood the weight of that calling in a way he never had before. It was late afternoon when Dan pulled the SUV into the parking lot of Maplewood Elementary for the first time since the arrest. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. He hadn't been sure if he'd ever want to come back here, to the place where he discovered something so monstrous hiding in plain sight. But Principal Hayes had called him personally, her voice warm and hopeful. There was someone who wanted to see Rex, someone who needed to see him. Dan climbed out, opened the back for Rex, and together they walked toward the main entrance. The hallways smelled the same, crayons and disinfectant and that indefinable scent of childhood. But everything felt different now. The innocence had been bruised. Mrs. Hayes met them at the office, her smile genuine but touched with sadness. "Thank you for coming, Officer Mitchell," she said. "Emma's been asking about Rex ever since she came back to school. Her therapist thought it might help with her recovery, seeing the dog who helped save her." Dan's heart squeezed. "She's back in school already?" "Just part-time, and with a lot of support. But yes, her mother says staying home was making her feel more isolated. Being around her friends again, having a routine, it's helping." They walked down the hallway, past cheerful bulletin boards and lockers decorated with construction paper art. They stopped at a classroom. Not Ms. Whitmore's old room, Dan noted with relief. That room had been reassigned, scrubbed clean, repainted. A new teacher, Mr. Alvarez, now taught there. This was the counselor's office, a cozy space with soft chairs, shelves full of books, and a rug patterned with colorful stars. Emma Rodriguez sat in one of the chairs, her mother beside her. When she saw Rex, her face lit up. "Rex," she breathed. Dan smiled. "Hey, Emma. Rex heard you wanted to see him. Can I pet him?" "Of course." Dan gave Rex the signal, and the dog padded over to Emma, his movements gentle and deliberate. Emma reached out, burying her fingers in his thick fur, and for a moment she just held on, her eyes squeezed shut. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for finding me." Rex sat perfectly still, his tail wagging slowly, and Dan had to look away for a moment to collect himself. Maria Rodriguez stood, her eyes glistening. "Officer Mitchell, I can't ever repay what you did. But I want you to know that Emma talks about Rex all the time. She says he's her guardian angel. He's a good dog," Dan said, his voice thick. "The best I've ever worked with." Emma looked up, her expression serious. "Is he going to keep helping other kids?" "He is," Dan promised. "That's his job, and he's really, really good at it." Emma nodded, satisfied. She hugged Rex one more time, then stepped back. "Okay, I just wanted to make sure he was okay, that he knew I was okay." Dan's chest ached. This little girl, who'd been through hell, was worried about the dog. That was the kind of goodness evil could never fully extinguish. "He knows," Dan said softly, "and he's really proud of how brave you've been." They stayed for a little while longer, talking, letting Emma ask questions about Rex's training and what he liked to eat and whether he had any dog friends. Normal, happy kid questions. The kind of questions that meant healing was happening slowly but surely. When they finally left, Dan felt lighter than he had in weeks. That evening, back at the station, Dan sat in the K9 training yard, watching Rex play with a rope toy. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. It was quiet, peaceful. Mind if I join you? Dan looked up to see Lisa Torres approaching, 2 cups of coffee in hand. She offered him one, and he took it gratefully. Long day? She asked, sitting beside him on the bench. Good day, actually, Dan said. Saw Emma. She's doing okay. Better than okay, considering. That's good. Really good. Lisa watched Rex for a moment. You know, I've been thinking a lot about that day. How easily we could have missed it. How if Rex hadn't alerted, if you hadn't trusted him. But he did. And I did. Yeah. Lisa smiled. You two make a hell of a team. Dan scratched Rex's ears as the dog trotted over, tired and happy. He's the best partner I've ever had. For legs or two. Lisa laughed. Don't let me hear you say that. They sat in companionable silence, sipping coffee, watching the sky darken. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Someone else's emergency, someone else's crisis. The work never stopped. There'd always be more cases, more dangers, more kids who needed protecting. But tonight, Dan let himself rest. Let himself feel the victory. Let himself be grateful. Because in a world that could be dark and cruel, there were still moments of light. Still second chances. Still heroes who wore fur and wagged their tails and refused to back down when it mattered most. Come on, Rex, Dan said, standing and stretching. Let's go home. Rex barked once, bright and joyful, and together they walked toward the parking lot. The metal still hung from Rex's collar, catching the last rays of sunlight, glinting like a promise. A promise that as long as there were officers like Dan Mitchell and dogs like Rex, there would always be someone standing between the innocent and the monsters. Always someone willing to fight. Always someone who refused to look away. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough to change everything.